Hi beautiful ladies, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk to you about the Diddy situation and why a man's mistreatment of you is not actually about you. I'm not going to go in depth into the case and the situation itself. I think at this point everyone knows what's going on and I don't want to trigger anyone. But I wanted to talk about the psychology of men who behave this way. And I think it's important to talk about this because a lot of find themselves with men like Diddy. And if you are not careful and you do not understand, you may find yourself blaming yourself for the situation. You may think, oh, this only happened to me because I'm worthless, or this only happened to me because, somehow I did something to deserve it and, I shouldn't have pissed him off. Maybe if I was obedient, or maybe if I was prettier, maybe if I was lighter, maybe if I was darker, he would have treated me better and this wouldn't have happened. And I want you guys to understand that situations like this are not your fault, okay? Like, the onus should be on the monster that carries out these crimes. And yes, you as women, a lot of times, especially if you come from a rough upbringing and you've kind of always had to grovel to have the basic necessities in life. I don't know if that was Cassie's case growing up, but I guess the moment that you're exposed to the opportunity to have a better life, I think it's within reason that the average person would jump at it. And the average person would jump at it with someone like Diddy because he was very reputable in the industry. He dominated from like the 90s up until a few years ago when he was exposed. Even though he wasn't like putting out music like that, he was still highly regarded as a leader in the hip hop world. And that kind of his legacy kind of just followed him around, where he ended up getting key to New York City, ended up getting an honorary degree and things like that. So he wasn't just a small fish. And so obviously when someone like that presents themselves to you and says, hey, I want to pretty much give you the life of your dreams, I think it's fair enough to say that the average person would jump on it and not think twice, which is why it is very important that you stay away from toxic men. Obviously, Cassie knew everything that Diddy had going on at this point. It's now been exposed in the courts. Regardless of the type of lifestyle that this person promises to give you, it is not worth your dignity, it is not worth your mental health, and it's not worth your actual physical health. Because Cassie suffered a lot of physical things from having to do things that Diddy told her to do. And I'm not going to go into details because I don't want to piss off YouTube. You can go ahead and read up on the case and Cassie's testimony yourself. But she had to endure some really, really sad things. And, it truly is a miracle that she was able to conceive and, that she's still here with us today. So shout out to Cassie. But yeah, your sanity, your health, whatever, it's not worth any amount of money. In fact, just because someone promises something to you doesn't mean that it's going to materialize. And it doesn't mean that you're going to have the wealth that they promised you, because it doesn't seem as if the wealth that Diddy promised her, it doesn't seem as if Cassie received that. It seemed as if maybe he gave her like an allowance, or he would take care of all the expenses. Because let's face it, if Cassie was well off financially, she probably would not have come after Diddy and sued him for damages after all these years. She initially sued him for the 30 million, only got the 20. She sued the hotel for leaking the video and got the additional 10 million. So, it looks like Cassie's motive in all this was to get money, but rightfully so. Like, why shouldn't she be paid for her trauma? It's her story and her experience. She has the right to be compensated. But just because Cassie got this outcome doesn't mean that the average woman, you and I, is going to get the same outcome, especially if you're dealing with a broke loser, which a lot of Black women seem to like to do. You're not getting any money. All you're going to get is heartbreak, a couple diseases, maybe a baby, and, some embarrassment. And you do not deserve to have something like that. Like, you are not placed on this earth to suffer. You are placed on this earth to carry out your purpose. And being with a man like Diddy, because men like Diddy, as I've said in previous videos, they are a dime a dozen in the Black community. Men like Diddy are not unique. From the Pookies and the Ray Rays to the educated lames, as people would call them, or the executives, it really does not matter the socioeconomic status, because a lot of Black men deal with the pathology that Diddy has. And a lot of Black women, if we're honest, we probably know somebody, have heard some crazy stories here on social media as well of some of the things that Black women of all shades have had to go through at the hands of men like Diddy. So love yourself enough to stay away. But back to my main point, when men like this mistreat you, it is never about you, and it's always about their unresolved issues. And for a lot of these men, their unresolved issues comes from their mothers. A lot of them have deep-seated mommy issues that they have not worked through. And instead of them working through the issues to heal, they project their hurt onto other people. They project their hurt onto the women who share a gender with their mother. And it often comes out in mistreatment because they're actually really mad at their mom, but because they cannot take out that frustration on their mom, they take it out on another human being who shares that gender. That rage that you have from your mom choosing to be a single mother, a lot of the red pill losers will speak up about single mothers. Their grievance with single mothers comes from their own single mother not choosing a better lifestyle for them, not choosing to make sure that they were raised in a two-parent household so that they could benefit from having two parents in a home, which is more financial stability, more psychological protection, emotional protection from having a harmonious household that comes from having two parents in a household. And instead of them holding the father accountable and saying, yo, you're a loser for leaving my mom, a lot of them will say, well, why don't you women choose better? Instead of asking those men to step up and be better, it's easier to take out your frustration on the quote unquote weaker vessel by saying, you women, this is all your fault because you chose to lay down with this man. So Diddy's mom exposed him to a lot of things that no child should be exposed to. And then there were a couple of other instances, a couple of other situations that happened to him growing up that pretty much shaped him into the person that he is today. And while those experiences, number one, are common for a lot of Black boys, I do talk about Black women experiencing SA. I think it's like 1 in 4 now Black women experience SA. There are similar stats for Black boys as well, but that's a topic that we don't really talk about in the Black community for various reasons. But despite all of this, that is still no excuse for Diddy's behavior. There are a lot of people who have gone through what Diddy has gone through and worse, and they still do not turn around and terrorize other human beings. Diddy made the conscious decision to be a monster, and the same way that he made that decision is the same way that he could have turned around and used his money to go to therapy, to heal, make better decisions with his relationships, and that includes, cutting off his mom so that he could be safe. A lot of people have to do that, unfortunately, with family members to ensure their safety, but he didn't do that, so this is all on him. This unresolved trauma often results in taking out your issues onto your romantic partner, which is why a lot of men, even though they claim to love women, a sign that a man has been traumatized is if he, first of all, is hypersexual. It's like he has this fire that cannot be contained, so to speak. And number two, if he has this irrational rage and aggression towards the gender that apparently he's supposed to love and show affection to. We all know that when we love our partner, the last thing that you're going to think about is being aggressive towards them because you love them, which is why in a lot of cases, a lot of people are super, super forgiving towards their partner and not as forgiving towards anyone else because you have a love for that person that you, quite frankly, wouldn't share with any other human being. And so it's quite strange when at the same time you claim to profess this love, you also turn around and you're mean and aggressive and very violent towards the fairer sex. And so you see this with Diddy, you see this with a bunch of other rappers where they're constantly hypersexualized, constantly talking about, how many women that they have. You saw that with Stevie J, the way that he treated Mimi Faust. But this all just points to an unresolved issue with their mother And so number one, they need that constant female validation, which is why they have women around them at all times. Number two, they need that intimacy that they lacked from their mother. And obviously, they're not going to have the same type of intimacy with their mom that they do with a romantic partner, but they need that closeness that they didn't get from their mom. And so they constantly seek it out from a bunch of women. And that comes from the Oedipus-Electra complex that I've spoken about previously, where we form our attachment style and our relationship with the opposite sex based on our relationship with the parent of the opposite sex. So for women, our relationship with other men stems from our relationship with our fathers. And for men, their relationship with women stems from their relationship with mothers, which is why it's so important if you decide to have a child that you make sure that you're doing it from an informed and healed place, because you can literally make or break that kid's future and potentially create a monster, which is what happened with Diddy. Memberships are now live on this channel. Click the link in the description box to sign up to receive access to exclusive content and perks. So this is essentially where the term daddy issues comes from. And the same thing applies for men. If you meet a man with mommy issues, steer clear, because he's going to make you pay in some way, shape, or form. And I also want to just clarify that just because a man is not close to his mom, I mean, he may not have the best relationship with his mother, doesn't mean that he is like Diddy, or, you know, he'll be abusive or whatever, or toxic. Unfortunately, there are some people who, I guess, they're not good parents. Sometimes that just stems from them not being ready to be a parent. They just haven't realized that. They don't want to admit it. And so that translates into them neglecting their kids. And so that's not the child's fault, obviously. Some people, they do try to work to gain their parents' approval and love and affection, but for whatever reason, the parent just doesn't want anything to do with that. That is not that person's fault. So if you meet a man who's not close with his mom, but he's respectful, I don't write him off just because his mom decided not to be a good mom. That's not his fault. But as long as he's aware of that dynamic and he's not he doesn't possess some of the characteristics that I mentioned a moment ago, then, you know, he's fine. At the end of the day, we all have some sort of hang up as human beings, unfortunately. Nobody's perfect. And so you shouldn't punish or lose out on a potentially good relationship with someone just because their parent ain't shit. So with that being said, when someone has unresolved trauma, not only do they often lash out and become abusive or violent, a lot of them also despise the woman's gender. They want to actually be a woman, which is why they are taking out the frustration on the woman, because they are jealous of her. They are jealous of the fact that she possesses something that he wishes that he had, which is to be a woman. And I've spoken about this in other videos. That is vag envy. A lot of times you'll see that with some gay men, not all, and some trans women, not all, and if you go on Reddit, you can type in, you just peruse some LGBTQ forums, and you'll see people admit, gay men and some trans women admit, that they are jealous of cisgendered women or women who were born a woman for being a woman. When a man again is abusive or is hyperfixated on degrading a woman, he's doing it because he wants to be the woman and is thereby jealous of her. It's similar to when women pull a girl's long hair or put gum in her hair so that the girl with the long hair has to cut it. Those girls did that because of jealousy. They identify within themselves that for whatever reason, they cannot grow hair as long as the long-haired girl can. And so instead of them, I don't know, figuring out how to grow their hair or putting in a weave, they would much rather see that girl suffer lack. And so they do something to cause that girl to cut off her hair to level the playing field. It's easier to punish the other person for having what they don't have rather than being bold to stand in your truth, which is often why you hear stories of Diddy himself not sleeping with Cassie, but he would often watch other men carry out his desires with her, because essentially Cassie was a proxy for Diddy while she slept with those men. So pretty much he wanted to trade places with Cassie, but couldn't based on his fears on society's views on gay men. And so he did the next best thing, which was to have Cassie stand in as a proxy, essentially. And I just have a final comment about his twin daughter, Jesse James and Delilah. I've heard people critique his daughters for appearing to not care about what's going on, but here are a few things to keep in mind. Number one, we don't actually know how his daughters feel about the situation, and it's no one's business, essentially, how they feel. They didn't commit these crimes that Diddy committed, so they don't deserve public scrutiny. Furthermore, Diddy is funding their trust fund and he is their father. So of course, they're going to naturally have some attachment or dependency or even loyalty to him because they share an emotional bond with their dad. And there's nothing wrong with it. Despite what they've heard, this is likely a deep psychological burden for them because their father's treatment likely doesn't match what is being revealed about Diddy, and naturally it's going to cause some form of dissonance and probably some shame, embarrassment, and shock because now everything is out in the open and they're also being scrutinized. And this is something that they're going to have to navigate, and probably, quite frankly, navigate with a therapist for a long time, because it's not like your dad was abusive towards your mom, like there was some domestic violence when he was with your mom, or your parents broke up, how does that make you feel? Like, there are some pretty disturbing things that have been revealed about Diddy that no one knew about up until this point, and they are learning about these things in real time along with everyone. Having to sit in the courthouse and hear these things is traumatizing. So they don't owe anybody their tears. I think that they deserve to live a fulfilling life and not be punished for their father's actions. And I feel like a lot of common folk, if you will, have a deep desire and fascination to watch, number one, pretty girls suffer, but also pretty and wealthy girls suffer on top of that. It's sort of like this whole eat the rich mentality where they think that because the wealth disparity is unfair, they have this desire to see the rich suffer. And even more so for these girls because they were born into the wealth and didn't do anything to get it. So it's sort of like they won the lottery at life, and that's not fair. They want to see the spoiled rich brats, quote unquote, in despair as a way to level the playing field. So these girls deserve to have fun. I believe that they are in their senior year now and about to they said that they're not going to go to college, but whatever they end up doing with their life, they deserve to enjoy it. They deserve to not have their childhood taken away from them. They deserve to enjoy prom and everything else that's going to happen and not suffer the consequences because of Diddy. And I think it's quite weird that people want to see their downfall as well. They don't really seem to be fixated with any of Diddy's other kids, their reactions, which is quite strange to me. It could be because they are confident Black girls and some people still have a problem with that. I don't know, but I think it's super weird and says a lot more about you wanting to see them fail than it does about the girls themselves and their lack of empathy, quote unquote. Anyway, these are my thoughts on the topic. Let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.